declare, after all, there is no enjoyment like reading. How much sooner one tires of anything than of a book? When I have a house of my own, I shall be miserable if I have not an excellent library. Aloha and welcome back to my channel. I'm Marilyn, at times called Maya, the baby boomer booktuber. And I'm so excited today because this is my first Jane Austen July. And I'm so happy to be participating in it. I've loved Jane Austen ever since I was in my 30s. Back in the 50s, we didn't read Pride and Prejudice as at least in my school, we didn't read it. So I wasn't familiar with Jane Austen until I hit my 30s. So let me tell you the story of how I became familiar and began to love Jane Austen. I was in my 30s and I was in a deep depression. I was getting divorced. I had a new baby and the baby was not well. So all these three things combined to really get me depressed. At that time, and we're talking the 60s, we didn't have, obviously, the internet, iPhones, even music was hard to come by if you didn't have a stereo. So the things that I was able to, the activities that I was able to do at that time were limited. And because of my depression, I was able to read magazines. I was always a big magazine reader. And I was able to listen to talk radio, which, believe it or not, hasn't changed much from then to now. But I wasn't able to listen to music at that time because I was so depressed. Well, during that time, I read a magazine article that said that during any kind of depression, one should read Jane Austen to feel better. So I went straight to the library and took out as many Jane Austen books as they would let me, because at that time there was a strict amount of book that I think there was 4, sometimes even 3 books that you were allowed to take out of the library at one time. And I sailed through them, and yes, I did feel better. I was brought into a world where people were the same as they are now, but with more manners and more wit, at least in my world at that time. And I have to say that Jane Austen kind of saved my life. So how could I not participate in Jane Austen July? This is my first Jane Austen July because this is my first year on Booktube as a creator. So now that you know my story, let's talk about the challenges. First of all, Jane Austen July is hosted by 3 wonderful women, 2 of which I'm subscribed to, and 1 I plan to subscribe to as soon as I do this video. One is Katie at Books and Things. She's a prolific reader and a very articulate reviewer and speaker of books, and I really enjoy her channel. And 1 is Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, and she's the one I haven't watched videos of yet. I know I have to start. And the 3rd one is my good friend and wonderful booktuber, Claudia from Spinster's Library, who, when she interviewed me a month ago, asked me if I was going to join Jane Austen July, and I said, yes, I am. Okay, so let's get to the challenges. And challenge number 1 is read 1 of Jane Austen's 6 main novels. Well, I'm going to read both of the novels that are going to be in the read-along. Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. I have to say I've read 147 pages already, and I don't remember reading this book. Let me talk to you about memory. Some people think that you can't remember everything that someone has said to you 20, 30 years ago, or books that you've read, or conversations you've had, or insults that have been thrown your way. I recently read Country Girls, and in Country Girls by Edna O'Brien, which I loved, so I went to look up other things that she said, other articles, and she said she remembers every conversation she's ever had, and every insult and every praise that she's ever received. And I have to say I have that kind of memory as well. It's called an autobiographical memory. And I'm not the type that remembers the dates, but I do remember the words and the conversations. So I'm pretty sure that I haven't read Mansfield Park. So that's my first Jane Austen book. The second will be here, and I bought a copy of Persuasion. And it's, I remember reading this, though I'm not sure what it's about right now, but I'm sure that I read it. And it's supposed to be a favorite of Jane Austen. So that's what I'm reading for my two. And this is also on the read-along. Challenge number 2, read something by Jane Austen that is not one of her main novels. And this was very new to me. I didn't even know she had books that were in part of her main novels. But I went to this wonderful secondhand bookstore called Book Off, and I got 3 books for $1 each. And what I'm going to read is Lady Susan. And what it says about it is that Lady Susan seeks a new husband for herself and one for her daughter. But Lady Susan is a selfish, unscrupulous, and scheming woman, highly attracted to men, who tries to trap the best possible husband while maintaining a relationship with a married man. Wow, I'm looking forward to that. So the next prompt is, read a nonfiction work about Jane Austen or her time. I think you noticed the teacup, and I have a story about tea. I guess I have stories about everything. Before I was 19, I hated tea. My mother used to, when I was sick, she would give me a cup of tea with sugar in it, and it tasted disgusting to me. And when I was on my own, somebody put a Lipton tea bag and poured some water, and I tasted my first pure Russian-style black tea, and I was hooked. And I'm still hooked. And from that day on, and you can ask my partner about this, that tea is a necessity in my life. And though I don't talk about it on Booktube, and you can see this is my real pot, and to be honest, I don't drink ladylike out of small, delicate cups. I want a big mug. But I thought that being a Jane Austen July, I would go with it. So for this prompt, I picked Tea with Jane Austen by Kim Wilson. And I got this from the library. It wasn't one of my $1 books. But they go into everything tea with Jane Austen. Tea on the road, tea for the stranded, and a lot of recipes as well. And there's some illustrations that look really, really Jane Austen-like. So I'm looking forward to this book. Okay, for the next prompt is read number 4. Read a retelling of a Jane Austen book. For that, I have 3 books. The favorite of these 3 books that I want to get to for sure is Death Comes to Pemberley by P.D. James. And it's a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, where it leaves off. And it says that P.D. James is the greatest living writer of British crime fiction and probably the genre's most talented practitioner ever. I like P.D. James mysteries, but she combines her two lifelong loves, Jane Austen and murder mysteries, in this masterful sequel to Pride and Prejudice. And I have to say that I love mysteries, as many of you know. So mysteries with Jane Austen is also my cup of tea, pardon the pun. The next book is The Jane Austen Marriage Manual by Kim Easel. And what this is about is it's a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice. So Kate is happy with her life. She has supportive friends, a glamorous magazine career, and love of all things Jane Austen. But when she loses her job and a financial disaster forces a sale of the family home, Kate finds herself facing a crisis that could test even the most stalwart of Austen heroines. And she goes on to jet setting, and turns out that Kate's first assignment is to test an Austen-inspired theory. In the toughest economic times, is a wealthy man the only must-have accessory? What begins as an article turns into an opportunity as Kate, now Lady Kate, jet sets to Palm Beach, St. Moritz, and London, where in keeping company with the elite, she meets prospects who make Mr. Darcy look like an amateur. That sounds very interesting. I hope to get to this, but I'm not promising. The next book is The Jane Austen Book Club by Karen Joy Fowler. And this, I heard about this all over Booktube, but Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading said she preferred the film adaptation. So I will get to that later. So I don't think, she said the book wasn't so good, but a lot of people do like it. But I'll get to that in the next prompt. And the next prompt is number 6. Watch a direct screen adaptation of a Jane Austen book. And 7. Watch a modern screen adaptation retelling of a Jane Austen book. I'm not going to do at least one of those things. I don't want to watch an adaptation of Jane Austen until I've reread all of her books. That's just me. But I will watch, if I can find it, the Jane Austen Book Club, since it's more of a modern retelling. I have a funny story about a modern retelling. I watched Clueless when it came out, and I loved it, but I had no idea that it was a retelling of Emma. Hello? They don't call me Sherlock for naught. Okay, so I'm not promising to watch any adaptations. I'm going to have all of the announcements of the 3 hosts down below, and also some of Claudia's playlists from her video. And I wish everybody a wonderful Jane Austen July, because I know I'm going to have one. Please subscribe if you're new, and like this video, and press the notification bell if you're so inclined. And I will be back with more videos and more tea, real tea this time. So until we meet again, my friends, chef's kiss and aloha. Hello again. I made a little boo-boo. I forgot to mention, read a book by a contemporary of Jane Austen. Well, I'm not going to do that, but I couldn't leave without mentioning that I'm going to read selected poetry of Lord Byron, edited by Leslie A. Marchand, and there's an introduction as well as notes. And there's a nice picture of him on the cover. And I had planned to read a poem per night. Lord Byron was a contemporary of Jane Austen. So I'm just going to read one paragraph. It's called To the Sighing Stephron. And I really enjoyed this poem because it's about when he first started writing poetry, and he wrote a poem to his friend, and his friend didn't appreciate it. So it says, Your pardon, my friend, if my rhymes did offend, your pardon 1,000 times over. From friendship I strove your pangs to remove, but I swear I will do so no more. So anybody who writes poetry can understand how people might not want to be put in their poem or even want to hear your poetry. So again, I wanted to put this in. Lord Byron, he's where it's at. Okay, bye for now.